She watched him walk away, pregnant, scared, but hopeful because he promised he'd be back. But when the knock came, it wasn't him. It was the news that shattered her world. The soft amber glow of an oil lamp flickered against the antique wallpaper of a small, quiet home in rural Virginia. It was 1910, and the world outside moved at the slow rhythm of horse-drawn carts and morning church bells. Inside, the air was still except for the sound of a woman's breath and the faint tapping of boot heels across the wooden floor. Clara stood by the window, her hands gently cradling the curve of her belly beneath an ivory lace-trimmed dress. Her hair was pinned up, wisps escaping around her face as she watched the man she loved prepare to leave once again. James Whitlock, a young town policeman with broad shoulders and deep, stormy eyes, fastened the last button of his uniform. He caught her gaze in the window's reflection. For a brief moment, the world seemed to pause, just the two of them suspended between love and duty. "You don't have to go," Clara said softly, her voice trembling with hope and dread. James turned to her, a smile tugging at his lips, though sorrow lingered in his eyes. "They need me, Clara. There's been a string of break-ins near the county line. They asked for backup. I can't say no." Clara lowered her eyes. She knew what it meant to love a man in uniform. The badge gave him purpose, but it also stole his time, his presence, and sometimes peace of mind. "I'm carrying your child," she whispered. "I need you too." James crossed the room in 3 long strides and stood behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her shoulders, his hands resting atop hers on her growing belly. The moment felt timeless. His chin nestled near her temple as they stood in quiet. "Embrace. I'll be back before the baby comes," he said. "That's a promise." Her throat tightened. He had made that promise before. Every time he left, it felt like a thread of her heart stretched further and further. She didn't doubt. His love, only the unpredictability of the world. She turned slightly to face him, her eyes glistening. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I won't," he said with conviction. "This is the last time. One more call. Then I'll be home for good. I want to build the crib with my own hands. I want to be there when our child takes their first breath. I want all of it with you." She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, grounding herself in the warmth of that moment. She could smell the faint scent of soap on his collar, the leather of his belt, the old wood of his holster. Familiar, safe, love. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the branches of the oak tree beside the porch. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Life went on, but for Clara, the world had narrowed to the man holding her, and the tiny life growing within her. He kissed her forehead, then knelt and pressed his lips against her belly. "Stay strong, little one. Daddy's coming home soon." "When?" He rose, their hands lingered in one final squeeze. As he stepped outside, Clara followed him to the door, holding on to the frame as if to keep herself upright. He turned once more, his silhouette framed by the golden morning light. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you more," she replied. Then he walked down the path toward the dusty road, his figure growing smaller with each step. Clara stood there long after he was gone, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the door frame. She whispered into the silence, "Please, come back to us." She didn't know it yet, but fate had been listening, and had already had other plans. The days passed slowly after James left, each one marked by routine and quiet aching. Clara kept herself busy, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. With James gone, the silence of the house became deafening. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the creaking floorboards beneath her feet, even the wind rustling the curtains, all reminded her of absence. Still, she refused to let despair in. Every morning, Clara walked to the mailbox at the end of the gravel path with a letter in hand. Each envelope held her heart in words updates about the baby, little things about the house, and sometimes dreams about their future. And every few days there would be a reply. James's handwriting was messy but familiar, smudged by rough handling and long journeys. She read his words over and over. "Clara, the days here are long, but the thought of you and our baby keeps me steady. I can't wait to hold both of you. Just a little longer, my love." His words were gentle and full of promise, but they carried something else to a shadow of exhaustion, maybe even danger. He never told her the full details of his work, but Clara could read between the lines. The smuggling ring he was pursuing had deeper roots than expected, and tensions were rising. Still, he insisted everything was under control. "Once we shut this down, I'm coming home for good," he wrote. "Start the crib without me if you must, but leave a few nails for me to hammer in." Clara smiled through tears each time she read those lines. She could almost hear his voice in the words, feel his arms around her again. She held each letter close to her chest before tucking them away in the carved wooden box by their bed as her belly grew. So did her longing. The nursery slowly came together, soft blankets folded in neat stacks, the cradle they had chosen together sanded and painted, tiny clothes hung with care. Each detail was perfect. Each item whispered hope, but the waiting began to stretch thin. 1 day passed with no letter. Then 2. Then a week. Clara tried to keep calm. Mail could be delayed. James might be too busy. But something inside her twisted with unease. She placed her hands over her belly and whispered, "Your father's okay. He has to be. He promised." By the end of the second week, her steps to the mailbox turned hesitant, her heart heavy with dread. The red flag on the box stayed down. Nothing came. She asked the local postman, a kindly older man named Mr. Sullivan, if he'd seen anything. He frowned, removing his cap. "No letters lately, ma'am. Maybe just a delay?" Clara nodded, pretending that answer comforted her. Inside, she knew something had changed. Nights became harder. She would sit by the window wrapped in James's jacket, rocking gently in the old wooden chair. She wrote letters even though there was no one left to send them to. She filled pages with love, with worry, with all the words she wished she could say to his face. "Jamie kicks when I say your name," she wrote once. "It's like he knows who his father is already." Weeks turned into a month. The silence stretched until it wrapped around her like a second skin. And though her body carried life, her soul began to feel like it was waiting for something that might never return. But Clara didn't give up, not yet. Not until she knew. Not until someone told her otherwise. Then, one rainy morning, when the world felt particularly heavy, there was a knock at the door. She wasn't ready, and nothing could prepare her for what she was about to hear. Rain tapped steadily against the window panes as Clara folded a tiny white baby onesie on the nursery rocking chair. Outside, gray clouds hung low, and thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. She was 8 months along now, her belly full, her ankles swollen, and her heart stretched thin from too many days without word. She hadn't received a letter from James in over a month. The silence had grown loud, cruel. She told herself every day that maybe tomorrow would bring news, that maybe he was just caught up in something complicated. But the doubt had crept in cold and persistent. Clara paused mid-fold, her breath catching as she felt a small kick inside her belly. She placed a hand over the bump and whispered, "He's out there. He promised. He'll come back." Then came the knock. It was sharp, urgent once, then again. Not the knock of a neighbor. Not the knock of someone stopping by for tea. Clara stood up slowly, her hands trembling. Something deep in her bones told her this moment would change everything. She walked to the door and opened it. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch. Rain soaked their hats and coats, and their expressions were solemn, too solemn. Mrs. Whitlock? The taller one asked, removing his cap respectfully. Her throat closed up. She nodded. I'm Officer Grady. This is Sergeant Miller. May we come in? Clara stepped aside, her vision already blurring. The baby moved again inside. Her, as if sensing the storm about to break. They stepped into the foyer, water dripping from their coats. Officer Grady held a folder under one arm, but he didn't open it. Instead, he looked her straight in the eye. There's been an incident, he said gently. Your husband James was dispatched to a remote cabin 2 counties over. He was pursuing a lead connected to the smuggling ring. Clara's knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the edge of the hallway table. Did he? She couldn't finish the sentence. He went in alone, Sergeant Miller said quietly. Called for backup, but by the time help arrived, he was gone. His patrol car was found abandoned. Driver's door open. There was blood on the seat? Quite a bit. Clara covered her mouth, shaking her head. No, she whispered. No, he promised me. He wouldn't just disappear. We've searched the area, Officer Grady continued. No body has been found. But it's been several weeks now. And with the conditions out there, wild terrain, wildlife, heavy. Rain, it's likely he hesitated, not coming back. She didn't cry right away. Her body froze in a state beyond shock. The officers' voices became distant echoes, like they were speaking underwater. Their words swirled together in her ears, blood on the seat. Vanished. No body. I don't believe it, Clara said softly, her voice barely audible. He would have come home, he promised. We're truly sorry, ma'am, Officer Grady said. James was a good man. Brave, selfless. He died in service. They left a small black case containing his badge, a folded flag, and a letter from the precinct. Clara didn't open it. When the door finally closed behind them, Clara stood still in the entryway. Her hands, once full of dreams and plans, now hung limp by her sides. She walked slowly to the nursery and sat in the rocking chair. She stared at the onesie she'd dropped on the floor. The edges damp from her wet shoes. Outside, the rain poured heavier. Thunder cracked above. And inside, Clara held her belly, rocking gently, whispering the only truth she could hold on to. He promised me. April arrived wrapped in soft winds and the scent of new blossoms, but for Clara, it brought no comfort. The world outside bloomed, while inside she lived in a season of grief that refused to pass. The days blurred together. She moved like a ghost through the house, the nursery prepared but untouched. Every time she looked at the crib, she imagined James kneeling beside it, holding a screwdriver and smiling proudly. She'd pictured them laughing, working together, dreaming about the child they were about to welcome. But James was gone, and all she had left was the echo of his promise and a future that no longer looked like the one they had imagined. Her labor began on a quiet, rainy evening. There were no rushed footsteps of a panicked husband, no hand to grip tightly, no strong voice whispering, "You're doing great." Just the midwife, warm and steady, and a house filled with silence that even the baby's cries couldn't chase. Away. Clara gave birth to a boy just after midnight. She held him to her chest, damp and wailing, and whispered, "Jamie, your name is Jamie." His small face was round and pink, but his eyes, deep and stormy gray, looked exactly like James's. Clara wept for hours, not from the pain of birth, but from the ache of what was missing. The room was too quiet, the house too still. She had brought life into the world alone, and the joy of that miracle was stained with sorrow. In the days that followed, Clara did her best to care for her son. She bathed him in the porcelain basin James had fixed last summer. She wrapped him in the blankets she'd sewn while waiting for letters that never came. At night, she rocked him in the nursery, humming lullabies to fill the emptiness. But the hardest part was telling Jamie about a father he'd never meet. She spoke aloud as if James could hear her through time, through space, through whatever. Thin veils separated this world from the next. Your daddy was brave. Jamie, she whispered one night, cradling him near the window. He helped people. He stood up when others wouldn't, and he loved you, even before you were born. As Jamie grew, Clara surrounded him with stories, not just of James's uniform or badge, but of his tenderness, his silly habits, his quiet strength. She showed Jamie the wooden box where she kept all of James's letters. They were worn now, the edges soft from reading and rereading. Each letter a fragment of a life interrupted, and though Jamie would never feel his father's arms around him, Clara made sure he would always know the warmth of his love. Still, each day held an ache she couldn't name. A part of her refused to fully accept the loss. No body had been found. No final goodbye had been spoken. Sometimes she dreamed he was alive, lost perhaps, but alive. And she'd wake up with tears drying on her cheeks and Jamie's small fingers curled in hers. People told her she was strong, but strength wasn't a choice. It was survival. She lived not because she was ready to move on, but because her son needed her. And in him she saw glimpses of James's eyes, his furrowed brow and thinking, even the shape of his small hands. Clara never stopped hoping. Not fully and on certain nights, when the wind rustled the curtains and the stars glittered like silent witnesses, she would whisper into the darkness, "If you're out there, James, come home, we're still waiting." She had no way of knowing then, but fate was still at work, and a twist impossible and miraculous was already on its way. 5 years had passed since that rainy morning, the day the knock came and changed everything. Jamie was now a spirited little boy, chasing butterflies through the yard with wild curls and wide gray eyes full of wonder. Clara watched him from the porch, a cup of tea in her hand and a storm of memories in her heart. Life had not been easy. Raising a child alone in a world built for two was a quiet battle fought daily. But Clara had endured. She had kept James's memory alive through bedtime stories, worn letters, and the softness in her voice when she whispered, "He would have loved you so much." Jamie would often ask about his father. Where did Daddy go? He once asked, while tracing the edge of James's badge with tiny fingers, to help people. Clara would answer, voice steady but heartbreaking, "But sometimes the people we love are called away longer than we expect." Jamie would nod, as if that was answer enough. Still, she never stopped listening. Every knock at the door, every crunch of footsteps on gravel, every dream that felt too real. A part of her always believed the story wasn't over. And then, one golden autumn afternoon, it happened. Clara was gathering laundry from the line when she heard it, a car pulling up the old dirt road, slow and unfamiliar. She froze. Visitors were rare. Her pulse quickened. Jamie ran to the porch, pointing excitedly. "Mama, someone's here." A tall man stepped out of the vehicle, his steps uncertain, his movements cautious, like someone seeing the world for the first time in a long while. Clara's breath caught in her throat. He was thinner. His face was lined and tanned, his beard peppered with gray. But the moment their eyes met, time unraveled. "James?" she whispered, his eyes filled with tears. Instantly, Clara. And then she was running through the yard, past the laundry, past disbelief itself, and into his arms. They held each other like people starved for touch, for truth, for time lost. James clung to her, burying his face into her shoulder, trembling. "Tried to come back. I never stopped trying." She pulled back, her hands cupping his weathered face. "How? Where were you?" He nodded slowly, blinking back years. "Ambushed, shot, left for dead. Locals found me deep in the woods, couldn't speak, didn't remember my name. I spent years recovering, piecing myself back together. And when I finally remembered. I had to find you. Clara couldn't speak. Her sobs choked her voice. She looked down and whispered, "There's someone you need to meet." James turned as Jamie stepped forward, clinging to the porch railing. "Is that?" he breathed. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Your son." James knelt, arms open. Jamie hesitated, then stepped forward with cautious curiosity. "Are you really my daddy?" he asked. James's voice cracked. "Yes, buddy, I am. I've wanted to hold you since before you were even born." Jamie looked at his mother, who nodded. Through tears. Then the boy ran forward, burying himself in James's arms. It was a moment soaked in redemption, in love's unyielding power to endure even when hope seems lost. That night, the house was no longer quiet. Laughter returned. Footsteps echoed. And the nursery, once only filled with memory, now echoed with stories, play, and a father's voice reading bedtime tales by the soft glow of the oil lamp. Later, as Clara and James stood in the doorway watching Jamie sleep, she whispered, "You kept your promise. Just not the way I expected." James kissed her temple, holding her close. "I never stopped trying to come home. Love was the map that led me back." Clara nodded, eyes closed, resting against his chest. And in that softly lit vintage room, once heavy with grief, now full of grace, the past finally gave way to a future written in love.